out later. Okay. Natasha's on her way home. So she'll be back. And then next week is Ironman Waco. And we have lots of other big races coming up from World 70.3 in Florida and Arizona. And people are starting off season events. So I'm standing in for her for tonight, but she will be back to lead things soon. But yeah, safe travels for them. As I've been getting my athletes ready for the next couple of big races, one of the things that kept coming up was not knowing how to change a flat tire. And that came up actually a lot. And then my tubeless athletes really were lost at what to do if they get a puncture. So we go over changing the flat so much, but what happens if you get a puncture? So Corey Wake from Bicycle World is jumping on with us, and he is going to do a quick demonstration on changing a flat and going over the puncture for the tubeless. Again, if you're like, I know how to change a flat, that's so good. It's amazing. Like, we really want everyone to be super comfortable with how to do that. But in that moment on race course, when you have a flat and your brain is like running, it's good to just have these refreshers getting close to race day. So Corey, I'm gonna let you go ahead and take it away and just give us a good refresher on changing a flat.
Sounds good. Thanks, Katie. So we'll start off with just some basic supplies that you're gonna want in your saddlebag kit or wherever you keep your stuff for your flat kit. 'Cause I know tri-bikes have some fancy compartments and stuff nowadays. So first and foremost, for tubeless riders, something we covered on like your pre-race stuff is making sure that you keep your sealants topped off in your tires. That'll definitely help with any small punctures. A 2-ounce bottle per tire about every 3 months or so should keep you running good. Both Stands and Orange Seal are great products. They're easy to apply into the tire. Orange Seal comes with a straw. The Stand will fit in your valve core when it's removed there. So making sure that you're just on top of your sealant will actually take care of a lot of stuff that we see on tubeless things that people just don't have the sealant in there when it comes time for that small puncture to be sealed up. There's nothing in there to do it. So that's one of the first things there is just being on top of that beforehand. Then if you're on course or on a ride, the first thing when you get a puncture or flat is you want to assess the situation and see the best course of action to take care of that. So with tubeless, if your sealant's not sealing it up and it's just spraying sealant out as you're riding and it's losing air very fast, that would indicate a significant size hole. Where if you hit, a pothole or railroad tracks with not enough tire pressure and hit those edges really hard, and you get a pinch flat on the tubeless, you'll pretty much lose air instantly. And that will be kind of one of those things you're going to know, depending on how much air flew out of the tire, what you might be in for there. As far as needing to take out the old sealant when you put in new sealant, you do not need to do that. These two brands, Stands and Orange Seal, both play well with each other. We haven't had any issues if you might have had Stands in there and then you put Orange Seal in there or vice versa. They tend to work well with each other inside the tire. After those 3 months or so, most of your sealant is probably either dried up, been used, or it's doing its job, which is coating the entire inside of the tire and keeping it more airtight is really what the sealant's there for, is to seal up all the pores in the sidewalls of the tires there. Secondary benefit is that it does help with punctures there. So no need to take out the old sealant. Typically, most riders are going to be replacing tires before they need to really worry about scraping off the inside buildup. Typically, you're going to run through your tires tread life or have some kind of a puncture that may require an entire tire replacement there. But if for some reason you're getting 2 years out of your tires and you're not running out of tread life or anything like that, yeah, there comes a time when that sealant gets built up on the inside of the tire that you really want to go in there and just like literally peel it off the inside of the tire. But most of the time we just put the sealant in there and go, and you're going to be good to go on that stuff. So you get a puncture, you got sealant spraying around while you're going on the road, pull over to the side of the road, find that hole, get it to the top of the tire, and give it like a little squeeze and judge how big the hole is. If it's about 1/8 of an inch in diameter, 3 to 5 millimeters, I would recommend for the tubeless people out there and tube to carry a tire boot. In a pinch, if you're not carrying this tire boot around with you, dollar bill, old gel wrappers, those kind of things that may be on the bike with you from doing your race can also substitute for a tire boot. I'll go a little bit more in depth when I'm actually doing the change here in a minute, where those will go. That's for tubed or tubeless. This would be a good thing to carry. Tubeless specific, we have these Dynaplug items here. These are plugs. There's the Racer Pro. This is probably the one that most people tend to go to. It's a very lightweight system here. It's double-sided. Whoops. You got two different plugs. You got one there for bigger punctures. So if you have a cut, maybe a piece of glass or something that's bigger than that 3 to 5 millimeters, you'd want to use the bigger side. And then you have this other smaller diameter, which would be good for, like we were talking about, a nail or something that, 3 to 5 millimeters or so. You're going to use these tools in a tubeless scenario. What you're going to do with this is, once you find that puncture in your tubeless tire, you're going to go ahead and just stab it into the hole and pull it straight out. And this is going to stay inside your tire. That's going to stay inside your tire. This rubber part right here will seal the hole, and then take your CO2 and inflate it, and you'll be good to go. I do like the other one here, but it's not as lightweight. And when you're in a race, you see how this is already ready to go, stab it and go. The other one I'm about to show you is great for casual riding. I do like it because it does come with a razor, because when that rubber tip is sticking out of the back of a road tire, you're gonna get thump, thump, thump every time it comes around. So you can come through there and cut it off with this razor blade. But in a race, honestly, I'm just gonna mash it down on the tire and get done with it. The pill is great, but as you can see, you have to assemble the pieces like this to there. Not too difficult, and it's ready to go. Stab it in there and you're done. Trim off the excess. However, in a race, seconds count. So fumbling with this, and then you're all sweaty and you drop it on the side of the road and it rolls into the grass, and then yeah, your headache starts there. So I like the Racer Edge one personally, the Racer Pro. Stab and go. Put your CO2 there, inflate it, good to go. Tubeless, if you don't want to mess with plugs on tubeless like these systems, you can always just put a tube into it with tubeless as well. Some things you want to, when you're assessing that size of the hole, is if you're going to put a tube in a tubeless or a tube tire, if it's much bigger than, 1/8 of an inch in diameter, you're definitely going to put a boot or something to cover that hole. So when you inflate your tube to 80, 90, 100 PSI, that it does not just blow back out that hole and give you another flat instantly. Probably familiar with quite a few of the different inflators out there. There's the Microflate Nano, which is super small, compact, lightweight. Thread it on there. It punctures the CO2. Put it on your valve stem. Quarter turn the CO2 backwards, and it'll release the air through the chuck into the tire. That's the one I use for my race day kit. Giant makes the control blast here. Very similar. Screws on, punctures the CO2. This one works off of being depressed. So when you put it onto the valve stem, this will depress down, and that'll control the flow of the air going into the tire. And then we have these right here, a little bit bulkier. However, these do have the trigger to operate it here. So you can literally just control when it goes in and out for you. These do use threaded or threadless CO2s. That's kind of nice that you could use anything. Whereas these other styles, make sure you're purchasing your threaded CO2 ends right here, and not threadless here. I would recommend for tubeless riders to go with a 20 to 25 gram cartridge. You need that much air going in there to make sure that that tire inflates properly and gets you up to a safe operating pressure. Like this 20 gram, you can see ideal for 29er mountain bike tires. That's going to get you plenty of air into your road tire at 25 millimeters or 28 millimeter tires. It'll get you in the ranges there. Some tire levers. We use the Pedro's tire levers here. They're sold in pairs. These are my personal favorite, best tire levers I've ever used. They hardly ever break. They only break because they got so many tire changes on them typically. Depending on your setup for race day, tubeless or tube, if you're running a aero rear disc wheel, you're going to want to make sure that you carry a 90-degree inflator or disc wheel air chuck in your kit so that you can air up your aero wheels, those Zip Super 9s, and there's a bunch of other brands out there. I always recommend putting these onto your inflator first so it gets a good seal right here. Then go put it onto your valve stem and open the air and inflate your tire there. So make sure that's in your kit if you need it for your setup come race day. If not, then that doesn't apply for you there. However, if you're running some of these deeper wheels, you want to make sure that you have either a tube that has a valve stem long enough, or you can purchase valve extenders, because some racers will use a different setup in the rear versus the front. Maybe like an 858 in the rear and a 404 or 454 in the front. What I'd recommend there is getting a tube with like a 48 millimeter valve stem and getting, like a 60 millimeter valve extender. That will allow you to have one tube with this pre-installed on it to work for either your front or your rear wheel and not have to think about it during the race. Yes, it may be overkill for your front, but you're there to have it take care of both of your tires at the same time and not carry two tubes with you. So make sure those are on to your spare tube before you start your race there. Now, as far as actually changing the tire, tubeless and tube, just remove your wheel from the bike in the correct manner. So like this bike's through axle. I would definitely chip down to the small ring in the rear. It's going to make it a lot easier for you. So this one's a tubeless tire here. We're gonna pretend like there was no air in there. This one's actually set up with a tube, but it's tubeless ready. So I start by breaking my bead all the way around the rim. That'll help you get that tire lever in there easier. And then with the hook side of your tire lever, you're going to insert it between the tire bead and the rim here. Let's see if we can get like that. Pull it up like that, and then just give it a push forward. Go around with it until your tire bead has been removed all the way around the rim. Pull out your old tube that's been punctured. If this was tubeless and you decided to put a tube in it instead of doing a plug, you're going to need to make sure and remove your tubeless valve stem from your rim before you insert your tube. And then, of course, find the puncturing agent, whether it was a nail, thorn, whatever may have caused that puncture to happen. You want to find that, remove it from the tire. Sometimes you'll see it sticking out of the tire, obviously. Other times you want to gently just take your hand and run it on the inside of the tire, always looking where you're going so you don't just run your hand across a piece of glass or something like that. Oh, there's a thorn. Usually if you pinch it like that, you'll be able to pull the thorns out pretty easily that way, and remove whatever's puncturing that. Once you've removed all of the stuff that may have punctured it there, then take your replacement tube. You always want to take the tube and give it some air so it's not just flat like that. You can use your CO2 to start this. However, the CO2 can sometimes put too much air in too quick. So just a little bit of mouth-to-mouth CPR is usually pretty good for the tube. All we're trying to do is to give it just enough so it has a circular shape to it. That'll help prevent getting pinches when you're installing the tire. You want to start with the valve stem. Pull your tire back. Valve stem in the valve hole first. Pull that tire bead back over the tube, and there's my tube just up inside there. Then I'm going to go around and put that tube in there all the way around, making sure that it's laying in there. It's not getting greased before you put it in there. Just lay it in there. Work your way around the rim. And once you've verified that it is tucked all the way up in there, you shouldn't, I don't know if I'll be able to, it might be too dark in there, but you shouldn't see any tube sticking out between the rim and the tire itself. Should be all tucked in there. Go opposite your valve stem when you start putting on your tire. And just pull that bead back into the rim, working your way towards the valve stem. Now this is the part that usually gets people here, is where it gets tight right at the end right here, where you're like, oh, I can't get that with my fingers. Tip number one, especially with tubeless tires, whether you're running tubeless or not, if you're running a tubeless tire, whether you have a tube in it or you're running it tubeless, you want to pinch the tire all the way around to make sure that both beads of the tire are sitting down in the center of the rim's cavity here, instead of up on the edges where it is when it's inflated. You want them sitting down in the cavity. That will give you just a few more millimeters of tire to work with. So that, let's see here, pinch that in there. That hopefully you should be able to finish this. With just your hands there. Give your valve stem a push up to make sure your tube is up inside the tire. Then I would put my CO2 on there, give it a couple bursts or two, get it, firm to the hand. Check it and make sure your tube is not popping out of the side of the tire. If you followed those steps about putting air in the tire or in the tube to give it shape, and make sure it was tucked into the tire's casing before you put the tire back on the rim, you should really have no issues there. But it's always good to double check that it is properly hooking the tire up to the rim here. Once you've double checked that, it all looks good to go. Go ahead and finish using that CO2. Like I said, a CO2 20 grams should get a tube tire somewhere around 80 PSI usually. Maybe a little bit more, maybe a little bit less, depending on how, if you used it to inflate your tube or not first. Again, that's why I like the 25 gram ones for tubeless or tubed on the road, because that'll definitely make sure you get down into the 100 PSI range. But again, know your tire pressures ahead of time. So hookless, tubeless rims right now are running significantly lower than the traditional 100 or 90 PSI you might have been used to on your tube or even previous hooked tubeless systems there. That's pretty much about that. If your puncture or cut was significantly larger than 3 millimeters or so, you would want to use that tire boot. That tire boot, yes, the inflator, we also do hear it referred to as a crack pipe from time to time. That's definitely, yes, that's what people call it for a long time. So if you had a tear in your casing somewhere in these areas, you would take this tire boot, which is it's pretty much a sticky patch, but for your tire. You would take it out of its package here, peel it off, and stick it to the inside. Yes, if you're running tubeless, this would most likely be covered with sealant. Do your best to just kind of wipe it off, because you're not carrying, a nice towel with rubbing alcohol with you. So just wipe it off or something, enough that this can kind of go on there, and then do everything else that we just did. And that'll keep your tube from exploding through the hole that's in your tire. Enough to get you back home and through the race is really what you're going for. If you had to put a tire boot in there, of course, I would recommend replacing that tire when you get back after the race. That is going to not be a permanent fix there. Now, the Dyna plugs that we were talking about, these I would call a fairly permanent solution. We've had a lot of people plug these, cut the edge of the rubber off so it doesn't have a big bump on there, and then ride hundreds of miles on those tires with no issues there.
All right, we got a couple of questions. Okay, the sealant. Do you need to flush out the old sealant and then put a new sealant every time we do a change for the sealant?
You do not.
Okay.
Kind of like I was saying earlier when I was answering that question is, within a year or two, you'll probably be good. If for some reason you're running that tire for 2+ years and you haven't worn through your, see if we can see them here. There's some tread wear indicators here. They're little circles in your tire. Yeah, see that little dot right there? Continental and a lot of brands put little tread wear indicators. If those are gone, time to replace your tire, regardless of what it looks like as far as rubber is concerned. But that sealant will start covering the inside of the casing and sealing it. So after a couple years of putting sealant in there, yes, you would get a big buildup on the inside of this of different sealant stuff like latex balls and the stuff that they use to seal the holes. You would want to clean that off, but again, most riders are replacing tires more than every couple of years. And then let's see here, we got there.
You let some air out and then put the sealant in and then pump it back up. I'm guessing that's if you're changing the sealant out.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay.
What you would do there. Well, this one's not a removable valve core, but you would remove your valve core off your stem and then put the sealant in there.
Okay, great.
This straw fits conveniently on there from Orange Seal, so that's nice that it fits on there that easily. Like I said, when that valve core is taken out, the Stan's bottle tip will also fit right in there perfectly too.
Perfect. Okay. So, and then Matt asked if, just to confirm, if you're in a race and you get a flat and you plug the tubeless, you can just keep riding even with that little rubber piece sticking out and just
you could
the tonking, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Usually what we've done in the past on those when you're out there on the road is when it gets, let me just open one here. It's a pretty soft, sticky rubber. You can tell it's actually sticking to the package there. Usually when it's in there, it's going to be about halfway in there like that. This stuff is pretty pliable. So like just me pushing on it already flattened it out. So we just push on it with our thumb as much as we can and then just get through the race. And then you can worry about trimming off the excess if you didn't get the one that came with the razor blade. But yes, you'll feel it on a road bike for sure. Mountain bikes, obviously that's not what we're talking about, but you wouldn't feel it on a mountain bike because of the knobbies.
Okay. All right. So this says when I use an inflator that screws onto the valve system, it always freezes to the stem. And then when you unscrew it, it takes the stem core out of the stem. Am I saying that right? Any suggestions?
Interesting. If it's taking your valve core actually out of the valve stem, that would lead me to believe that your valve core is not tight. Let me go get a valve core here. If it's breaking the tip of the core off, that's just because you want to pull as straight up as possible with the CO2s.
Yeah, no. So what happens is it's the micro inflators with the little wrench that you screw it on. Not like, so you screw it onto the valve stem, right?
This one?
No, it looks like a little. They're smaller even than that, and it's got a little lever on top so you screw it onto the valve stem, and then the CO2 freezes the whole thing, especially if it's it out, right? And then so it's inflated now. So then when you go to unscrew it to take that inflator off the valve core or the stem, right? It just it backs out the valve core every single time.
Gotcha. Yeah, I'm with you.
It's like now you're stuck because you can't then put the stem back in and make it tight because then if you don't have another tube, you're stuck.
Yeah, and it let all your air out too.
And it let all your air out.
Right. I would want to say double check your inflator. Like this one does look like you would thread it on because it has these knurls for you to grab it. But at the end of the day, it's just a compression fitting with a piece of rubber in there. And so is that one right there. So the fact that yours actually screws on is kind of uncommon. I would maybe just go with one that doesn't screw on so you can literally just put it on and pull it straight off of your valve stem. Maybe make sure your valve cores are fully tightened in there with this is a core remover right here. And just make sure they're fully tightened before the race. Because you don't have time to sit there and wait for it to cool down and unfreeze off the valve stem. But yeah, I would maybe just swap out to something that you don't have to thread onto your valve stem, honestly, if that's a continual issue of that happening. But every inflator that we carry from Genuine Innovations or a lot of the brands, even the giant one, is just a rubberized press fit right here, so it doesn't actually screw onto the valve stem itself there. But yeah, I'd say if that's a continual problem for the design that you're using, I would just get one of these and kind of avoid that issue with that tool design there.
Right. Okay. Tim said if you don't have a way to start and stop your CO2, for example, it all releases when you reverse at a half turn, do you just put it all in the tube and tire and hope there's no pinch?
Yes. Normally, like I said, if you put the air in the tube to give it a shape, I haven't pinched the tube in 10 years, knock on wood, by following those techniques of putting a little bit of air into the tube and just making sure that when you are closing that tire bead back onto the rim like that, make sure there's not a tube sticking right here before you do that number. And that should pretty much prevent all your stuff from pinching at that point. Again, maybe get a CO2 inflator that allows you to control it. But yes, those quarter turn ones or half turn ones like this, those can be somewhat tricky. Let me go grab a CO2 and kind of show you the actual it's punctured there. Valve stem. A little bit of air in your tube, just enough that it doesn't, you don't want it to crease on itself like that. That would not be enough air for it. And one thing that I always recommend is do a couple of practice flats at home right now before a race. Get your technique down so that when it comes on the side of the trail, you're not like, oh wait, I don't know how to use my CO2. Oh wait, I don't know how to use this Dyna plug. That always helps too, is just giving a little shakedown, do a practice run or two so you're kind of familiar with those motions. So when it comes time to actually do those in a quicker time. So we're on the side of the road. I just did a little bit of air in the tube to make sure that it was good to go. Open my valve stem. Thumb behind the valve stem will help you a lot because it won't let it chase up in there. Put it on there. And yeah, I just send it. Just go all the way with it. When you're sweaty, try not to hold on to it. Some brands send you little to go over it because like that one person was describing, these get frozen and it even will freeze up in here too. Straight off with it. And like you can even see the frost on there a little bit. And so like that one person was describing is there, I was able to just pull it straight off, good to go. If you have one that threads on there, again, I would just not run that one. But as you can see, I just inflated it, no pinches, and my tire bead is seated all the way around, and this is probably 80 PSI, it feels like, if I was to take a guess.
Perfect. Great. Okay. Andrew said, how well can you use gels or dollar bills if you have a tear flat?
I would go with the dollar bill first over a gel packet. Fold it over probably twice on itself. So you'll end up with the size of a dollar bill, maybe give or take around that size. And that should be good to go. Again, those ones I told you about, those are kind of last resorts if you don't have one of these already in your kit. But yeah, I've used dollar bills before. The Cliff Bar like wrappers are usually too thin, but your gels and goos, just make sure they're flattened out, put it in there and put your tube in there and make sure it's still covering the cut area. and inflate your tube, and you'll be good to go. Anything, if you have a cut that is, I mean, inches long, you're done for, unfortunately. There's not much when it comes to multi-inch long cuts. There's not much you can do when it gets that big.
Okay.
You know, cuts, you know, maybe a dollar bill could do a half inch to maybe an inch. That's kind of about the max that I would expect a dollar bill to hold back at those pressures. And that's even kind of pushing it there when it comes to using those secondary methods that again, those are, you're out in the middle of nowhere with a ride and all you have is a couple bucks on you and you can't call anybody to come and get you on your training ride. That's where those dollar bills and stuff can kind of save you there. But
okay, and last one. So my tubeless tires were filled up, but then after time things would be flat. What does that mean?
So tubeless and tube tires do need to be inflated regularly. I recommend every time you go ride, that should be part of your pre-ride check over. You're getting your bottles, you're getting your shoes on, you're checking your tire pressure before you go ride. That will help with pinch flats and stuff like that. We do notice a lot, like I was talking about, not keeping the sealant topped off every 2 to 3 months. That's one of the biggest things that we see with tubeless is somebody won't keep the sealant in there. They'll air it up to 90, 100 PSI. They'll do their ride. They'll come back tomorrow morning or the next day and it's lost 20 PSI or something significantly more than expected. Usually it's because they don't have any sealant in there. So it's not sealing up any of the tiny little punctures that you may have in your tire casing at that point. So definitely make sure your sealant levels are good. If your sealant levels are good and it's still losing air, a couple things, it could depend on how new that tire is and how well seasoned the inside of the tire casing is with that sealant. The more seasoned it is, the better chances you are that you're not going to run into a low tire the next day. But we do see it even on like the Cell 4 bikes, like this brand new bike, we put sealant in the tires to go tubeless on the floor. We air up the pressure, we roll it to the Cell 4. 3 days later, it's almost flat on the rim. It's because nobody rode it to get that sealant around and to seal everything up. Then you would want to, if it's still leaking after that, I would do the soapy water test and see where your bubbles are coming from. Because with tubeless, you have your tape on the inside of the rim. If the tape is not good, or if your valve stem is not airtight up inside the rim channel here, you'll get little bubbles forming right here. That'd be an indication that either your valve stem needs to be tightened or the tape may need to be redone. And it could be one of those things that it's leaking so slowly that you don't hear it. So that's why it just seems like it keeps losing air all the time, even though you just put sealant in there. It could be something that is not to do with the tire on the outside of it, but more or less airtight on the inside is your problem there. And so we do see sometimes the rim tape for tubeless can get pinched with a tire lever and it'll put like a little micro cut into it. We see that sometimes, and you'll get air leaking through the spoke holes here or sealant coming through these holes right here. Those would be all indicators that you should get it looked at and either retaped or check your valve stem and make sure that it's snug on your tubeless stuff.
Great. All right. Well, I think that's all that we have for the questions tonight, Corey. Thank you so much. That was really, really helpful from both sides. So we really, really appreciate that. So thank you. Awesome.
And then Andrew, just to follow up, the gels and the dollar bills, you would use it just like the tire boot. It would go in between the tire casing and the tube. You just put it where you need it to cover the hole so it doesn't give itself a hernia and blow out.
I gotcha. Thanks for clarifying.
Yeah.
Great. All right. Well, it's 6:35, so I am going to end the call tonight, but Natasha will be back soon. I hope you all have a great week, and I will see some of you at Ironman Waco next weekend. So see y'all soon. Oh, wait, one more thing. Don't forget Ceramic Speed. Still, if you're interested, visit Bicycle World, send them an email. So yes, just want to make sure I say that. Be fast.
Yes, most of those emails I've been getting pretty quickly, and I've been jumping on them as quick as he can there. I think the order Kyle's gonna be putting in, I think tomorrow for the next run of those. So if you guys got any last minute Ceramic Speed stuff, let us know. They're telling us around 3 to 4 day shipping, so it would be cutting it close if we don't already have it coming in, but still possible to get it put on before race day. We still have some open time slots for that stuff too. So
great. Awesome. Thank you. All right. That's it. Y'all have a great night. Thanks, Corey. That was awesome.
Yeah, not a problem. Have a good one.
Thanks, you too.